At 18, she was given to a billionaire CEO for being too fat, cast aside by her own father, humiliated in front of a crowd, and handed over like property. But what everyone expected to be a cruel fate takes a shocking turn. Because this billionaire doesn't want her body, he wants something far more dangerous. A hidden talent she never knew could change the world, and his darkest secret. But as whispers spread, betrayal strikes, and lies threaten to destroy them both. Was she saved from her father's cruelty or thrown into a storm that could cost them everything? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Emily's fingers trembled as she stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, trying to hold back tears that threatened to spill. The tight black cocktail dress her father had chosen dug painfully into her sides, the fabric straining across her curves in a way that made her want to disappear. "Stand up straight." Her father yanked her arm roughly, making her wince. "Stop slouching like some lazy teenager. This is an important night." Emily tried to pull the dress down a bit, but it wouldn't budge. "Dad, please, it's too small. I can barely breathe." "Too small?" he sneered, his grip tightening. "Maybe if you hadn't gotten so fat, we wouldn't have this problem. Do you know how much this dress cost me? Everything I do for you, and this is how you repay me?" The familiar knot of shame twisted in Emily's stomach. She blinked rapidly, knowing that crying would only make things worse. The dress felt like a prison, squeezing her until she could hardly draw breath. "You're lucky anyone would even look at you," her father continued, his words cutting deeper than any physical pain. "If we can get someone rich interested tonight, maybe you won't be such a burden anymore. God knows I've tried my best with you since your mother left." Emily's heart clenched at the mention of her mother. The empty space she'd left behind seemed to grow larger with each passing year, filled only by her father's increasing bitterness and cruel words. The exclusive charity gala was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel. As they entered the grand ballroom, Emily felt hundreds of eyes turn toward them. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns, but she had never felt more out of place. Her father's hand remained firmly on her arm as he steered her through the crowd, his smile bright but his eyes calculating. "Stand up straight," he hissed between clenched teeth. "And for God's sake, try to look pleasant for once." The whispers started almost immediately. Emily could hear fragments as they passed. "Isn't that Richard Grace? Poor man. Stuck with that daughter. Did you see how she's practically bursting out of that dress?" Her cheeks burned with humiliation as her father stopped at various groups, his voice too loud and eager as he spoke about her like she was a prize horse up for auction. "My Emily here just graduated high school. Top of her class, of course. She's quite the writer, aren't you, dear? Show them that smile of yours." Emily tried to force her lips upward, but it felt more like a grimace. She wanted to sink into the floor as her father continued his circuit of the room, each stop more mortifying than the last. "She'd make an excellent wife for someone with vision," he announced to yet another cluster of wealthy-looking men. "Just needs a firm hand to guide her, that's all. She's young, fertile, good breeding stock, if you know what I mean." The laughter that followed made Emily's stomach turn. She couldn't believe this was happening, that her own father was trying to barter her away like this. But she knew better than to protest. That would only lead to consequences later. A sudden hush fell over the crowd. Emily looked up to see what had caused the change in an atmosphere and found herself staring into the coldest blue eyes she'd ever seen. Alexander Holt stood before them, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. His perfectly tailored black suit probably cost more than everything Emily owned combined. She'd seen his picture in business magazines, the ruthless CEO who'd built an empire before age 35, but nothing had prepared her for his presence in person. "Mr. Grace." Holt's voice was deep and controlled, cutting through the whispers like a knife. "I couldn't help but overhear your interesting sales pitch." Emily's father practically vibrated with excitement. "Mr. Holt." "Yes, Emily, stand up straight." "Mr. Holt." I was just telling everyone about my daughter's potential. Such a bright girl, just needs the right man to take her in hand. Stop talking. Holt's command was quiet but absolute. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as he turned those piercing eyes to Emily, studying her with an intensity that made her want to shrink away. Her father's grip finally loosened as Holt stepped closer. Emily could hear the crowd's collective gasp as the billionaire reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "Name your price," he said simply, not taking his eyes off Emily. "Mr. Holt, that is, whatever you think is fair," her father stammered, his face flushed with greed and anticipation. The scratch of pen on paper seemed impossibly loud in the silent ballroom. Holt tore the check free and held it out, still not looking at her father. "This should cover any inconvenience." Emily's father snatched the check, his eyes widening at the amount. His hand fell away from her arm completely as he stepped back, leaving her feeling strangely untethered. The room spun slightly as Emily tried to process what was happening. Was she being sold? Bought? Her breath came in short gasps, the too tight dress feeling even more constrictive. Then Alexander Holt was there, looming over her. She flinched instinctively as he leaned down, expecting more cruel words or rough handling. Instead, his breath was warm against her ear as he whispered words that would change everything. "You're coming with me because I didn't buy you. I rescued you." Emily's heart stuttered in her chest as she looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. The ice in his eyes had melted slightly, replaced by something she couldn't quite read. But for the first time that evening, she felt a tiny spark of hope. The crowd around them buzzed with excitement and scandal, but Emily barely heard them. In that moment, caught between her father's dismissal and Alexander Holt's steady gaze, she stood on the edge of a new beginning, terrifying and uncertain, but somehow less frightening than the life she was leaving behind. The tight dress still squeezed her ribs. The whispers still echoed through the ballroom. But as she looked up at her unexpected rescuer, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of freedom. The sudden flash of cameras felt like lightning strikes to Emily's eyes as Alexander Holt guided her through the whispering crowd. Her legs trembled beneath her, barely able to support her weight as reality crashed over her in waves. What had she just agreed to? Had she traded one cage for another, perhaps an even more gilded and dangerous one? The murmurs grew louder, following them like a wave of judgment. "Did you see that? Holt actually bought her. That poor girl. What a scandal." Emily's breath came in short gasps, the too tight dress squeezing her ribs with each step. Her vision started to blur. At the edges, dark spots dancing before her eyes. Just as her knees began to buckle, she felt something warm and heavy settle across her shoulders. Alexander had draped his suit jacket over her, creating a shield between her and the prying eyes of the crowd. The expensive fabric carried a subtle scent of cedar and something distinctly masculine. It was enormous on her frame, making her feel simultaneously protected and even smaller than before. "Keep walking," he murmured, his hand steady at the small of her back. "My car's just outside. You're doing fine." His voice was different now, softer, though still carrying that edge of authority that seemed as natural to him as breathing. Emily forced herself to put one foot in front of the other, focusing on the sound of their footsteps against the marble floor rather than the whispers that followed them. The night air hit her face like a blessing as they emerged from the building. A sleek black car waited at the curb, its dark windows reflecting the city lights. A uniformed driver held the door open, his face carefully neutral as Alexander helped Emily inside. The leather seats were butter-soft beneath her, the interior dark and quiet. As Alexander slid in beside her, Emily pressed herself against the door, trying to make herself as small as possible. The engine purred to life, and they pulled away from the curb, leaving the bright lights and whispers behind. For several long minutes, neither of them spoke. Emily stared out the window, watching the city blur past, her mind racing with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She jumped when Alexander finally broke the silence. "You're thinking the worst right now," he said quietly. "I can see it in your face." Emily's fingers twisted in the fabric of his jacket. "Aren't you going to tell me what you want from me?" "What I want?" he said, is for you to stop trembling like a trapped animal. I meant what I said back there. This isn't a purchase, it's a rescue. She turned to look at him then, really look at him. In the passing streetlights, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes had lost that Arctic chill from earlier. Why would you rescue me? She whispered. You don't even know me. A small smile touched his lips. That's where you're wrong, Emily Grace. I know your words. I know your heart. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What? The weight of silence. That was you, wasn't it? Posted on the Literary Haven last year under the username Midnight Scribe. The blood drained from Emily's face. Those essays, her secret writings, poured out in the dead of night when the weight of her father's criticism became too heavy to bear. She'd never told anyone about them, never signed her real name. How did you? Your voice is unmistakable, Alexander said, his own voice growing softer. The way you described feeling trapped in your own skin, drowning in expectations you could never meet. The hope you found in small moments of beauty. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. I was in a very dark place when I found your essays. They gave me something to hold on to. Emily stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. This powerful man, this titan of industry, had found comfort in her midnight confessions. You're lying, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Sometimes the heaviest chains are the ones we forge ourselves, he quoted, and Emily's heart stopped. Her own words, coming back to her in his deep voice. But even the strongest chains can be broken, link by link, if we only dare to believe we deserve to be free. Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. She remembered writing those words, hunched over her laptop while her father's latest tirade echoed in her ears. She'd never imagined they'd reach anyone, let alone change someone's life. The car slowed to a stop, and Emily realized they'd arrived at one of the city's most exclusive high-rises, a towering spire of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the night sky. Alexander stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her from the car. Emily hesitated for a moment before taking it, noting how his large hand engulfed her smaller one. His palm was warm and slightly calloused, not the soft hands she'd expected from a man who lived in boardrooms. The doorman bowed slightly as they passed, and Emily felt herself shrinking again under the man's curious gaze. The elevator ride was silent, but not as uncomfortable as before. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, Emily couldn't hold back a small gasp. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering cityscape, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The space was massive, decorated in shades of gray and blue, modern but not cold. It spoke of wealth, yes, but also of solitude. There was something almost lonely about its perfection. Alexander's hand was still steady at her back as they stepped into the apartment. He turned to face her, his expression more serious than ever. You're safe now, he said firmly, each word weighted with promise. No one will hurt you here. No one will demean you or try to change you. This is a sanctuary, nothing more, nothing less. Emily stood there, his jacket still draped over her shoulders, the city lights painting patterns across the floor around her feet. The night had turned her world upside down, and she still wasn't sure whether to trust this man who claimed her words had saved him. But as she looked up into his face, seeing the sincerity in those eyes that had seemed so cold just hours before, she felt something shift inside her. Perhaps this wasn't another prison at all. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was the beginning of her escape. The glittering skyline spread out before her like a sea of possibilities, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the constricting dress protest the movement, and wondered what tomorrow would bring in this strange new world she'd stumbled into. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm patterns across Emily's face. For a moment, she lay still in the unfamiliar bed, its sheets softer than anything she'd ever felt before. The events of the previous night crashed over her like a wave. The gala, her father's cruel display, and Alexander Holt's unexpected intervention. The guest suite was larger than her entire bedroom at home. Cream-colored walls gave the space an airy feel, while touches of soft blue in the furnishings created a sense of calm. Emily sat up slowly, running her fingers over the silky duvet. Everything felt surreal, like she might wake up any moment to find herself back in her old life. A gentle knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called hesitantly, pulling the covers up to her chin. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair entered, carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Grace. I'm Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper." Her warm smile put Emily instantly at ease. "Mr. Holt asked me to bring you breakfast and let you know he'd like to join you, if you're feeling up to it." The aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries made Emily's stomach rumble, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. That's very kind." The housekeeper set the tray on a small table by the window, then moved to open a nearby closet. "I took the liberty of hanging up some clothes for you, just some basics until you can shop for yourself. The bathroom's through that door, with fresh towels and everything you might need." Emily's throat tightened at this simple kindness. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing, dear. Just take care of yourself." Mrs. Peterson's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. "Shall I tell Mr. Holt you'll be ready in about 30 minutes? Emily nodded, overwhelmed by the gentleness in the woman's manner. After Mrs. Peterson left, she slipped into the bathroom, gasping at the luxury of the marble-lined space. The shower's hot water helped wash away some of the tension from the previous night, and the soft clothes Mrs. Peterson had provided, simple black leggings and an oversized sweater, felt like armor after the constricting cocktail dress. When she emerged from the bathroom, Alexander was already seated at the small table, his attention focused on a tablet in his hands. He looked different in the morning light, still imposing in his crisp white shirt and perfectly tailored pants, but somehow more approachable. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair for her. "Good morning, Emily. I hope you slept well?" "Yes, thank you," she managed, sinking into the chair. The breakfast spread before her was beautiful. Fresh fruit, yogurt, pastries, and what smelled like perfectly brewed coffee. "Please, eat," Alexander encouraged, pouring coffee into a delicate china cup. "We have much to discuss, but first you need sustenance." Emily picked up a croissant, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mr. Holt." "Alexander, please." "Alexander," she corrected. "I still don't understand why I'm here. Last night, you said something about my writing, but..." He set down his coffee cup, his blue eyes intent on her face. "I meant every word I said last night. Your essays showed me something rare. Raw talent combined with emotional honesty. That's why I brought you here, not as a mistress, not as a trophy, but as someone with genuine purpose and potential." Emily's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I want to give you the opportunity to pursue your education, to develop your voice as a writer. You have a gift, Emily. One that shouldn't be stifled or hidden away." The pastry crumbled in her grip as tears threatened to spill. "But why would you do this for me? You don't owe me anything." "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But your words helped me during a very dark time in my life. Consider this, my way of paying it forward." Emily stared at her plate, struggling to process his words. It seemed too good to be true. A fairy tale ending dropped into her lap just when things seemed darkest. But then she caught something in Alexander's expression, a tightness around his mouth that made her stomach clench. "There's something else, isn't there?" He set down his cup with deliberate care. "Yes, and you deserve to know the full truth." He took a deep breath. "Your father's financial situation is dire. He's gambled away not just his savings, but the family estate as well. There are significant debts to some very dangerous people." The room seemed to tilt sideways as Emily processed his words. "What? What are you saying?" "If you leave now, your father will face not just financial ruin, but likely jail time. The people he owes money to aren't known for their patience or mercy." Emily's breakfast sat untouched before her, the formerly appetizing spread now looking like props in some cruel play. Her hands gripped the edge of the table as the full weight of her situation settled over her. "So I'm still trapped," she whispered. "Just in a different kind of cage." Alexander leaned forward, his expression intense. "No, you have choices, Emily. I can help your father settle his debts, give you both a fresh start. But I won't force you to stay. If you want to leave, I'll arrange for your safety elsewhere. The choice is yours." But it wasn't really a choice, was it? Despite everything her father had done, despite the years of criticism and emotional abuse, she couldn't bear the thought of him in prison, or worse, at the mercy of his creditors. The morning sunlight continued to stream through the windows, but Emily felt cold now. Her life had been irrevocably altered in the space of 12 hours. The breakfast before her, the luxury surrounding her, the man offering her both sanctuary and education, it all seemed like a beautiful mirage that could vanish at any moment. Her finger traced the rim of her untouched coffee cup as she struggled to process the magnitude of change thrust upon her. Yesterday, she had been a prisoner in her father's house. Today, she sat in a billionaire's penthouse, offered freedom at the price of accepting his help. The irony wasn't lost on her. To save her father from his own choices, she would have to accept the charity of a stranger who claimed her words had once saved him. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and uncertain futures. Emily's breakfast grew cold as the morning light painted shadows across the table, marking the passage of time in which everything she had known had been transformed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander's penthouse. Emily wandered from room to room, her sock-covered feet silent on the polished hardwood floors. The vastness of the space only emphasized how alone she felt. She paused at a window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. The city sprawled below like a glittering tapestry, cars moving like tiny jewels along the streets. From this height, everything looked small and distant, much like how she felt, elevated but isolated. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and marble, untouched and pristine. The living room, with its plush cream-colored sofas and abstract art, felt more like a museum than a home. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal. Emily hugged herself, fighting back tears. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal. One moment she had been in her father's house, enduring his cruel words, and the next she was here, in this crystal palace in the sky. But was she any less trapped? Emily? She turned to find Alexander standing in the doorway of his home office, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. Despite his casual stance, he carried an air of authority that made her straighten instinctively. "Would you join me for a moment?" He gestured toward his office. Emily followed him, her heart picking up speed. The office was warm and inviting, unlike the rest of the penthouse. Dark wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with books. A large desk dominated one side of the room, its surface neat but lived in. Alexander moved to his desk and picked up a thick manila folder. "There's something I'd like to show you." He handed her the folder, and Emily opened it with trembling fingers, her breath caught in her throat. Inside were printouts, dozens of them, of her online essays. The pages were marked with highlights, underlines, and notes in the margins. "I wasn't exaggerating last night," Alexander said softly. "Your words, they found me at my lowest point." Emily sank into one of the leather chairs, staring at the marked-up pages. Her essays had been anonymous posts on a small writing forum, raw, honest pieces about pain, hope, and survival. She'd written them late at night, pouring out her heart when the weight of her father's criticism became too heavy to bear. "This one," Alexander said, reaching over to point at a heavily highlighted essay. "You wrote about finding beauty in broken things, about how cracks let the light in." His voice grew quiet. "I read it the night I was considering ending everything." Emily's head snapped up, meeting his intense gaze. The successful, powerful man before her seemed at odds with the image of someone contemplating suicide. 3 years ago, he continued, I lost someone very dear to me. The circumstances, they haunted me. I blamed myself. The depression that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. He ran a hand through his dark hair. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was browsing online, looking for, I don't know what, and I found your essay. Emily's fingers traced her own words on the page. What made this one different? Your honesty. The way you described pain without wallowing in it. How you found hope in the smallest things. A flower growing through concrete, a kind word from a stranger. He smiled slightly. You wrote about being too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too different. But you concluded that maybe the world needed more people who felt too deeply, who cared too much. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. All those nights she'd written, feeling completely alone. Someone had been reading. Someone had been listening. Someone had seen value in her words when everyone else saw only flaws. Alexander leaned against his desk, his expression serious. But there's something else you need to know, Emily. My position as CEO is complicated. The board of directors watches my every move, looking for any excuse to remove me. If they discover you're living here under these circumstances, they'll think the worst, Emily whispered, understanding dawning. They'll assume. Yes. They'll use it to destroy my reputation, force me out of the company. He ran a hand over his face. I'm not telling you this to pressure you. You have every right to be here, but you deserve to know the full situation. The weight of guilt settled heavy on Emily's shoulders. This man had offered her safety, education, and a chance at a real future. In return, her very presence could cost him everything he'd worked for. She stared at the folder in her lap, at the evidence of how her words had touched his life. But now her presence threatened to undo him. The irony was bitter. The very person who had seen her worth might lose everything because of her. Maybe I should leave, she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The kitchen was filled with warm light as Emily sat at the gleaming marble island, watching Alexander move about with surprising ease. He'd shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms as he pulled ingredients from stainless steel appliances. I hope you like pasta, he said, setting a pot of water to boil. It's one of the few things I can make without burning down the kitchen. Emily managed a small smile, though her earlier words still hung heavy between them. You cook? When I need to think. He began chopping fresh herbs with practiced movements. And we have quite a bit to think about, don't we? The simple domesticity of the scene felt surreal after the emotional revelations in his office. Emily watched as he added salt to the water, his movements precise and measured. About what I said earlier, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. About leaving. Alexander turned to face her, his blue eyes intent. That's exactly what they want, Emily. Your father, the board, the gossip columnists. They expect you to run, to hide, to feel shame for something that isn't your fault. The truth of his words stung. She could already imagine the headlines, the whispers, the satisfied smirk on her father's face when he heard she couldn't handle it. Alexander added the pasta to the boiling water. Do you know what happens if you leave? Emily wrapped her arms around herself. You'd be safe from scandal. And you'd be exactly where they want you. Powerless, voiceless, convinced that you deserve nothing better. He stirred the pasta with more force than necessary. Your father would win. The board would congratulate themselves on maintaining their precious image. And another bright light would be snuffed out, because society decided she was too inconvenient. Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. Alexander set down the wooden spoon and leaned across the counter. Emily, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his, struck by the intensity of his gaze. I'm not offering you a place to hide, he said firmly. I'm offering you a chance to build something of your own. To study, to write, to become the person you were meant to be before your father tried to crush your spirit. He moved to drain the pasta, steam rising around him. You wouldn't be here as my mistress or my charity case. You'd be here as someone I'm mentoring because I recognize your potential. Because your words saved my life, and I believe you have the power to touch countless others. Emily watched as he plated the pasta, adding fresh herbs and a light sauce. The simple meal looked more appetizing than any of the elaborate dishes she'd picked at during her father's dinner parties. But the board, she started. The board can be handled, he said, setting a plate in front of her. I've dealt with their threats before. What I won't do is let them or anyone else bully you into giving up your chance at a real future. Emily twirled pasta around her fork, considering his words. The memory of the gala rose unbidden. Her father's cruel grip on her arm, the whispers, the feeling of being nothing more than merchandise to be traded. The shame and helplessness threatened to overwhelm her. No. She straightened her spine, gripping her fork tighter. She wouldn't let that moment define her. She wouldn't let her father's cruelty write the rest of her story. "If I stay," she said slowly, "it would be on my own terms." Alexander nodded, encouragement warming his usually stern features. "I want to work," she continued, gaining confidence. "Not just write, but actually earn my way. And I want to go back to school, finish my degree." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I need to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I'm not what he said I was. That I'm not worthless, or stupid, or too much." "You never were any of those things," Alexander said quietly. "Maybe not," Emily agreed. "But I need to know it. Really know it, not just hear it from someone else." Alexander reached for 2 water glasses, filling them from a crystal pitcher. "Then that's exactly what we'll do. You'll work. I have connections at several publishing houses that would benefit from your talent. You'll study. We'll look into programs that interest you. And you'll write. Emily, you'll write your truth without fear." He lifted his water glass, the crystal catching the light. Emily raised hers as well, feeling something shift inside her, like a door opening to possibility. No words were spoken as they touched glasses, but the silent agreement hung in the air between them. This wasn't charity or rescue anymore. This was a pact, to fight back, against those who would diminish them, to build something meaningful from the ashes of what her father had tried to destroy. Emily took a sip of her water, the cool liquid washing away the last taste of doubt. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She would stay and prove that she was more than her father's cruel words, more than society's judgments, more than anyone's attempt to make her small. The pasta was simple but delicious, and as they ate in companionable silence, Emily felt the first real stirrings of hope. Whatever came next, board meetings, or tabloid headlines, or her father's inevitable attempts to drag her down, she would face it. Not as the trembling girl from the gala, but as someone ready to write her own story. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as Emily sat at the kitchen island, nursing her second cup of coffee. The morning felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Alexander appeared, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, his laptop tucked under his arm. "Ready to start your new chapter?" he asked, setting up his computer. Emily's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "I guess so. First things first, education." Alexander's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I've researched several online programs that would allow you to complete your degree from here." Emily leaned forward, watching as he pulled up different university websites. Her heart quickened at the course listings: literature, creative writing, psychology. All the subjects she dreamed of studying before her father had deemed them useless. "These are all accredited universities," Alexander explained, scrolling through the options. "You can take classes at your own pace, and the coursework is just as rigorous as traditional programs." But Emily hesitated, her old insecurities rising. "Won't it be expensive?" Alexander's blue eyes met hers steadily. "Consider it an investment in your future, one that you'll repay through your work and writing." They spent the next hour reviewing programs until Emily selected one that felt right: a bachelor's in creative writing with a minor in psychology. Alexander helped her complete the enrollment forms, his efficient manner making the process less overwhelming. "Now for your workspace," he said, standing. "Follow me." He led her down the hallway to a room she hadn't explored yet. When he opened the door, Emily's breath caught. The space was flooded with natural light from 3 tall windows. A sleek desk faced the city view, complete with a new laptop and ergonomic chair. Bookshelves lined one wall, while a comfortable reading nook with cushions occupied a corner. "This is for me?" Emily's voice wavered. "Every writer needs their own space," Alexander said simply. "The laptop is set up with all the software you'll need for both schoolwork and writing. The shelves are empty now, but we can fill them with whatever books inspire you." Emily moved to the desk, running her fingers along its smooth surface. A small vase held fresh flowers, purple irises that added a splash of color to the minimalist space. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll use it," Alexander replied. "That's all I ask." He showed her how to use the laptop and various programs, then left her to settle in. "I have meetings this afternoon, but Maria will bring you lunch. Take your time exploring the space and getting comfortable." Once alone, Emily sat at the desk, opening a blank document. The cursor blinked at her expectantly. She placed her fingers on the keyboard, then froze. What if she couldn't write anymore? What if everything she produced was garbage? Hours ticked by. She typed, deleted, typed again. Nothing felt right. By late afternoon, her shoulders ached from tension, and her screen showed more blank space than words. When Maria brought dinner to her office, Emily realized she'd barely touched her lunch. The housekeeper clicked her tongue, disapprovingly. "Señorita Emily, you must eat to feed your mind." Emily managed a weak smile, but her appetite had vanished under the weight of self-doubt. As twilight painted the sky in deep purples and blues, she heard Alexander's footsteps in the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened. "How was your first day?" "Terrible," Emily admitted, pushing back from the desk. "I can't write anything worth reading." Maybe you were wrong about me." Alexander crossed the room, pulling up a chair beside her. "Show me." Reluctantly, Emily turned the screen toward him. He read through her scattered paragraphs, his expression thoughtful. "Do you remember the essay you wrote about finding beauty in broken things?" he asked suddenly. Emily nodded, surprised he'd bring it up. "I read it on a night when I was considering ending everything," he said quietly. "My company was succeeding, but I felt hollow inside. Empty. Your words about how broken pieces can create something new, something meaningful. They reached me when nothing else could." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding. "I wrote that after dropping my mother's favorite teacup. I'd tried to glue it back together, and the cracks caught the light in an unexpected way." "Exactly." Alexander leaned forward. "You took a small moment and found universal truth in it. That's your gift, Emily. You see beauty where others see brokenness, hope where others see despair." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. "But what if I can't do it again? What if that was just luck?" "Writer's block happens to everyone," he said gently. "But your voice, your unique way of seeing the world, that doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just needs time to emerge." He stood, extending his hand. "Come on. You need a break, and some real food." Over dinner, Alexander shared more about how her essays had impacted him, describing specific lines that had resonated during his darkest times. Emily found herself smiling, then laughing as he recounted his first attempts to track down the anonymous writer. "I had my best tech people trying to trace your posts," he admitted. "But you'd used different usernames each time. I was afraid of my father finding out," Emily explained. "Writing was the one thing he couldn't control. And now it's the thing that will set you free." After dinner, Emily returned to her office to gather her things. The city spread out below, a tapestry of lights and shadows. She stepped onto the small balcony, letting the cool night air wash over her. "Thank you," she whispered to the stars, her heart full of gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, understood, valued for who she was, not who someone else wanted her to be. Back inside, she opened a new document. This time, her fingers moved steadily across the keys, writing about standing on balconies and finding courage in unexpected places, about second chances and the way hope could bloom even in the darkest corners of life. She wrote until her eyes grew heavy, until the words flowed from some deep place inside that had been waiting to be unlocked. When she finally saved her work and turned off the laptop, a quiet determination had settled in her chest. She would prove her worth, not to her father or society or even Alexander, but to herself. One word at a time, one day at a time, she would reclaim her voice and her story. The girl who had stood trembling at the gala was gone. In her place was someone ready to write her way into a future of her own choosing. Days settled into a comfortable rhythm at the penthouse. Emily found herself drawn to the morning sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her study nook. Each day began with online lectures and coursework, her notebook filling with careful notes as she absorbed knowledge like a sponge long denied water. Maria, the motherly housekeeper, made sure Emily never missed breakfast, bringing fresh fruit and warm pastries along with encouraging smiles. "Your brain needs fuel, pequeña," she would say, patting Emily's shoulder before bustling away. The mornings flew by in a blur of virtual classrooms and academic discussions. Emily discovered she had a natural talent for debate, something that surprised her given how her father had always dismissed her opinions. In her introduction to philosophy class, she found herself engaging in spirited discussions about ethics and morality with classmates from around the world. "You made some excellent points about moral relativism today," her professor had commented in their latest session. "I appreciate how you connected it to modern corporate responsibility." The praise made her sit straighter, a warm glow spreading through her chest. She was learning to trust her voice, to believe that her thoughts had value. Afternoons were devoted to writing. Emily had transformed the small office Alexander gave her into a sanctuary. She'd arranged potted plants near the window and hung inspiring quotes on the walls. Her favorite was pinned right above her laptop. "Your words have power. Use them wisely." Some days, the words flowed easily, pouring onto the page like water. Other days, they came slowly, each sentence carefully constructed like a delicate piece of origami. But she wrote every day, no matter what. Alexander had taught her that consistency mattered more than inspiration. The evenings were what Emily looked forward to most. Dinner with Alexander became a time of rich conversation and quiet understanding. He never pushed her to talk when she was processing a difficult day, but he was always ready to engage when she wanted to discuss ideas or share something she'd learned. "Tell me about your classes," he would say, genuinely interested in her progress. His blue eyes would focus intently on her as she explained concepts from her psychology course or shared insights from her creative writing assignments. One particular evening, as they finished their meal, Alexander seemed thoughtful. "I'd like you to meet some friends of mine," he said, carefully watching her reaction. "Clara and David Stone. They're good people, Emily. People I trust completely." Emily felt her chest tighten with anxiety. Meeting new people still triggered memories of cruel whispers and judgmental stares, but she saw the gentle encouragement in Alexander's eyes and found herself nodding. "When?" "Tomorrow evening. Just dinner here. Nothing formal." The next day, Emily spent extra time choosing her outfit, finally settling on a simple navy dress that made her feel both comfortable and confident. When Clara and David arrived, she was surprised by their warmth. Clara immediately put her at ease with a genuine hug. "Alexander has told us so much about you," she said, her eyes kind. "I've been looking forward to meeting the young writer who's captured his respect." David, a tall man with laugh lines around his eyes, shared his wife's friendly demeanor. "Clara's been practically bouncing with excitement since Alexander invited us," he teased. Over dinner, Emily found herself drawn into engaging conversations about literature, art, and social justice. Clara, it turned out, ran several charitable foundations, while David worked as a human rights attorney. "What are your thoughts on using narrative as a tool for social change?" Clara asked, genuinely interested in Emily's perspective. Emily took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "I believe stories have the power to create empathy," she began, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "When we read about someone's personal experience, it becomes harder to dismiss their struggle or deny their humanity." "Exactly." David leaned forward, enthusiasm lighting his features. "That's what I've been trying to explain to my colleagues about impact litigation. Statistics don't move judges, stories do." The evening flowed naturally, filled with laughter and thoughtful discussion. Emily found herself relaxing, contributing more and more to the conversation. She noticed Alexander watching her with quiet pride as she held her own in a debate about educational reform with David. As Clara and David prepared to leave, Clara pulled Emily aside. "You're special, dear," she whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you different." The warmth of the evening stayed with Emily as she helped Maria clear the table, despite Alexander's protests that she didn't need to. She was just finishing when she heard Alexander's phone ring in his study. His voice, usually warm and measured, took on a sharp edge that made her pause in the hallway. "The board has no right to question my personal life," he was saying, tension evident in every word. Emily moved closer to the partially open door, her heart beginning to race. "My private residence is exactly that, private." Alexander's voice grew colder. "If certain board members are spreading rumors about my household arrangements, perhaps we should discuss their own questionable decisions." There was a pause, and Emily could hear him pacing. "No. You listen carefully. My personal life is off limits." End of discussion. The call ended with a sharp click, followed by the sound of Alexander setting his phone down with controlled force. Emily pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. The board was asking questions about her presence here. They were suspicious, just as Alexander had warned they might be. Her stomach churned with anxiety. Everything Alexander had built, his company, his reputation, his life's work, was at risk because of her. The warmth of the evening evaporated, replaced by a familiar chill of fear and guilt. But as she stood there, in the darkness of the hallway, something else stirred inside her, a determination she hadn't known she possessed. Alexander had rescued her, protected her, believed in her when no one else did. Now it was her turn to protect him. Emily straightened her shoulders, her jaw set with resolve. She wouldn't let him lose everything because of her. Somehow, she would find a way to shield him from the board's suspicions. She owed him that much. Silently, she made her way back to her room, her mind already working on possible solutions. She wouldn't be a burden or a liability. She would prove that his faith in her wasn't misplaced. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the penthouse windows as Emily finished her breakfast. Alexander stood by the elevator, keys in hand, a mysterious smile playing at his lips. "I have somewhere special to show you today," he said, his blue eyes twinkling. "Bring your notebook." Emily's heart quickened with curiosity as they rode the elevator down. In the past weeks, she'd barely left the penthouse, feeling safer in its confines. But today felt different. Alexander's energy was contagious, and she found herself eager to venture out. His sleek black car glided through downtown traffic until they reached an impressive stone building with towering columns. The Metropolitan Library stood like a temple to knowledge, its weathered steps leading up to massive wooden doors. "This is where I used to come when I needed peace," Alexander explained, holding the door for her. "I thought you might find inspiration here too." Emily's breath caught as they entered. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across polished wooden floors. The scent of old books and leather filled the air. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched toward ornate ceilings, each one filled with countless stories waiting to be discovered. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her fingers trailing along the spines of nearby books. Alexander guided her through the quiet halls to a private study room where an elderly gentleman waited. His silver hair was neatly combed, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He stood when they entered, offering a warm smile. "Emily, this is Professor Harold Lang. He's taught literature at the university for over 40 years and has mentored some of the city's finest writers." The professor's handshake was gentle but firm. "Alexander tells me you have quite a gift with words, young lady." Emily blushed, starting to demur, but Alexander produced a folder. "These are some of her essays, Professor. The ones I told you about." Professor Lang settled into his chair, adjusting his glasses as he began to read. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She'd never shown her writing to anyone deliberately before. Alexander had only found her work because she'd published anonymously online. Minutes ticked by as the professor read, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he looked up, fixing Emily with keen eyes. "Your voice is raw, honest, and powerful. You have a natural talent for drawing readers into your emotional landscape." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? Indeed." He tapped the papers meaningfully. "But talent alone isn't enough. Are you willing to work hard? To push yourself beyond what's comfortable?" "Yes," Emily said without hesitation. surprising herself with her certainty. "Writing it's everything to me." The professor's face crinkled into a smile. "Then let's begin. I have some books I'd like you to read, and we'll meet twice a week to discuss your progress." For the next 2 hours, Emily found herself immersed in a fascinating discussion about narrative structure, voice, and the power of personal essays. Professor Lang challenged her thinking, pushed her to dig deeper, but always with encouragement and wisdom. Alexander sat quietly, watching as Emily came alive, her hands moving animatedly as she discussed her favorite authors. Her usual timidity melted away when she spoke about writing, replaced by passionate conviction. "I want to write stories that make people feel less alone," she explained, her eyes bright. "To give voice to those who think their pain is invisible." "That," Professor Lang said firmly, "is exactly the kind of mission that creates meaningful literature." Before they left, the professor loaded her arms with books and writing assignments. "Remember," he said, "your voice matters. Don't let anyone silence it." On the drive home, Emily couldn't stop smiling, clutching her new books to her chest like treasures. "Thank you," she said softly to Alexander, "for everything." "Seeing you light up like that is thanks enough," he replied, his voice warm. That evening, they shared Chinese takeout at the kitchen island, trading fortune cookie messages and laughing at their absurdity. Emily couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so light, so free. "You will find success in unexpected places," Alexander read from his fortune, arching an eyebrow. "Well, that's rather vague." Emily giggled, breaking open her own cookie. "A surprise awaits you under the full moon." "These are getting ridiculous." Their laughter filled the kitchen, and Emily marveled at how comfortable she felt. This man, who had seemed so intimidating at first, had become someone she trusted completely. But peace proved fleeting. That night, Emily's dreams twisted into nightmares. She was back at the gala, her father's cruel voice echoing through the ballroom. "Worthless," he sneered, his face contorting. "Who would want you? Your words are as empty as your head." She tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The crowd's laughter grew deafening. Emily woke with a gasp, tears streaming down her face. The darkness pressed in around her, and for a moment, she was disoriented. Then she heard a gentle knock at her door. "Emily, are you all right?" Alexander's voice was soft with concern. She wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine," she called, but her voice cracked. The door opened slowly, and Alexander stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed from sleep. "I heard you cry out," he said gently. Fresh tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. "I'm sorry I woke you. Don't apologize." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emily drew her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I dreamed about my father," she whispered. "About the gala." He was saying all the things he used to say. Alexander's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "Your father was wrong about you, Emily. So wrong. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head, telling me I'm nothing." "Look at me," Alexander said firmly. When she met his eyes, he continued, "You are brilliant, compassionate, and stronger than you know. Your words have the power to change lives. They changed mine." Emily's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He wrapped his fingers around hers, warm and steady. They sat like that for a long moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. Then Alexander stood, still holding her hand. "Come on," he said softly. "I know what helps me when I can't sleep." He led her to the balcony, where 2 comfortable chairs faced the glittering cityscape. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying away the last remnants of her nightmare. They settled into the chairs, neither speaking. The city stretched out below them, a tapestry of lights against the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. A gentle breeze carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine from the balcony garden. Emily glanced at Alexander's profile, struck by how different he looked in this soft darkness. The sharp edges of the businessman were gone, replaced by something more vulnerable, more real. He turned and caught her looking, a gentle smile touching his lips. In that moment, Emily felt something shift between them. The air seemed to grow thicker, charged with possibility. This was more than mentorship, more than gratitude or obligation. Her heart beat faster as she recognized the truth. She was falling for him. They sat together under the stars, both acutely aware of the changing tide between them, yet neither willing to break the delicate silence. The city's symphony played on below, a backdrop to this quiet moment of revelation. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Emily's writing office, casting a warm glow over her desk. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she read through her latest essay one final time. After weeks of careful editing and Alexander's gentle encouragement, her collection of writings was finally ready to share with the world. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, glancing up at Alexander, who stood beside her desk. He smiled, his blue eyes warm with pride. "More sure than I've ever been about anything. Your words deserve to be heard, Emily." Taking a deep breath, she clicked the publish button. Her new blog, Grace Notes, went live with a collection of 20 essays exploring themes of self-worth, healing, and finding strength in vulnerability. Alexander had helped her design the website himself, spending evenings beside her as they chose fonts and colors. The result was elegant but approachable, just like her writing. The homepage featured a simple introduction, words from a journey of discovering worth. "Now we wait," Emily said softly, her heart racing with equal parts excitement and fear. But they didn't have to wait long. Within hours, comments began appearing on her posts. By evening, social media shares had multiplied exponentially. Emily sat cross-legged on the office couch, tears streaming down her face as she read message after message. "Your words gave voice to everything I've felt but couldn't express," she read aloud, her voice trembling. "I've spent years hating my body, believing I was too much. Reading your story makes me feel less alone." Alexander sat beside her, offering a box of tissues. "You're touching lives, Emily, just as you touched mine." Another comment made her gasp. "I've been following your essays since you started posting them anonymously. They helped me through my darkest days. Thank you for being brave enough to share your full story now." The responses continued pouring in over the next few days. Women shared their own stories of facing rejection, of being told they were too big, too loud, too much. Emily's inbox filled with messages from readers who found hope in her journey. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen island sharing dinner, Alexander showed her the analytics. "Over 10,000 unique visitors in the first week," he said, pride evident in his voice. "And the engagement rates are extraordinary. People aren't just reading, they're connecting." Emily pushed her plate aside, overwhelmed by emotion. "I never imagined. I mean, when I was writing those first essays, hiding in my room at my father's house, I felt so alone. To know that my words are helping others feel less alone." "You've always had this gift," Alexander said softly. "You just needed the space to let it shine." He reached across the counter and took her hand, his touch sending warmth through her entire body. "Emily, I need to tell you something." His voice was different now, more vulnerable than she'd ever heard it. "These past weeks, watching you grow into your strength, seeing you touch so many lives, you've changed me too." Emily's heart skipped a beat as he continued. "I built my empire on being cold, calculating, keeping everyone at arm's length. But you..." He squeezed her hand gently. "You've become the heart I never thought I had." Tears welled in her eyes at his words, but before she could respond, he straightened up, his expression turning serious. "Which is why I want to introduce you properly to society." "What do you mean?" "The annual Innovation Gala is next week. It's one of the biggest events in the business world. I want you there, not as someone's property, but as my protege. As the brilliant writer you are." Emily's breath caught. The memory of the last gala she attended, the one where her father had tried to sell her, flashed through her mind. Alexander seemed to read her thoughts. "This will be different," he promised. "This time, you'll walk in on your own terms, with your own achievements to stand on." The night of the gala arrived clear and cool. Emily stood before her mirror, but this time there was no one yanking at her clothes or spitting cruel words. The dress she wore, A flowing emerald green gown that complemented her curves perfectly had been chosen by her, for her. Clara Stone, who had become a dear friend and mentor, had helped her prepare. "You look radiant," Clara said, adjusting Emily's hair. "Alexander won't know what hit him." Emily blushed. "It's not like that between us." Clara's knowing smile said she thought otherwise, but she didn't push the subject. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the flash of cameras. As Emily entered on Alexander's arm, she held her head high, remembering how far she'd come. Midway through the evening, Alexander clinked his glass for attention. The crowd hushed as he took the stage, his commanding presence drawing all eyes. "Many of you know me as a businessman," he began. "Someone who deals in numbers and strategies. But tonight, I want to share something different. I want to introduce you to someone who reminded me that the greatest innovation isn't in technology or finance. It's in the human spirit." Emily's heart pounded as he gestured for her to join him. "This is Emily Grace," he announced, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Her words have touched thousands of lives, including my own. She is not my possession or my project. She is my inspiration and one of the most talented writers I've ever known." The crowd erupted in applause. Emily felt tears prick her eyes as she looked out at the sea of faces, not judging or mocking this time, but truly seeing her. Alexander continued, "If you haven't read her blog, Grace Notes, I encourage you to do so. Her essays about resilience and self-discovery are changing lives. She reminds us that true worth isn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the courage to be authentically ourselves." More applause filled the room. Emily saw Clara and David beaming from their table. Several people held up their phones, presumably already looking up her blog. As they stepped down from the stage, Emily was surrounded by people wanting to talk about her writing. Literary agents handed her cards. Women hugged her, sharing how her words had affected them. A magazine editor asked about doing a feature story. Later that night, as the crowd thinned, Emily found a quiet moment alone by one of the tall windows. She looked out at the city lights, remembering how lost and worthless she'd felt at the last gala. Now, her heart was full of joy, not from the attention or acclaim, but from the profound sense of finally being seen for who she truly was. The reflection of Alexander appeared beside her in the window. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Emily turned to him, her eyes shining. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I know exactly who I am and what I'm meant to do." He smiled, and in that moment, Emily saw in his eyes everything he felt for her: pride, admiration, and something deeper that made her heart flutter. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city sparkle below, both aware that this was just the beginning of their story. The morning after the gala dawned bright and clear, but dark clouds were gathering. Emily sat at her desk in her small office, scrolling through congratulatory messages about her blog when her phone buzzed with an alert. Her heart stopped. There, splashed across her screen in bold letters, was a headline that made her blood run cold. "Billionaire's secret scandal. CEO bought teenage daughter from desperate father." Emily's hands trembled as she clicked the link. Below was a photo of her father, looking appropriately distressed, tears gleaming in his eyes as he spoke to reporters. The article quoted him extensively. "I was in a difficult position, and Holt took advantage. He promised to help, but his real intentions were far more sinister. My poor daughter. She's barely 18. Bile rose in Emily's throat. More notifications kept coming. Other news outlets picking up the story, social media exploding with speculation. Her father had sold his toxic narrative to every tabloid that would listen. The office phone rang, making her jump. It was Clara Stone, her voice tight with concern. "Emily, dear, are you seeing this?" "Yes," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "Clara, what do I do?" "Stay calm. Alexander's PR team is already working on it. Don't read anything else online, and don't answer any calls from numbers you don't recognize." But Emily couldn't stop reading. Each new article twisted the truth more grotesquely. Some implied Alexander had a history of collecting young women. Others painted her father as a desperate man forced to make an impossible choice. The comments sections were worse, filled with cruel speculation about her character and worth. A soft knock at her office door made her look up. Alexander stood there, his face drawn with concern. "Emily." She burst into tears. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, kneeling beside her chair. "No, this is your father's doing, not yours. We knew he might try something like this. But your reputation, your company, can weather this storm," he said firmly, though Emily noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Just then, his phone buzzed. Emily watched his face darken as he read the message. "The board wants an emergency meeting," he said quietly. "I have to go." Emily felt sick. The board. They'd already been suspicious of her presence. Now they had ammunition. "Let me come with you," she pleaded. "I can tell them the truth." Alexander shook his head. "That would only make things worse. Stay here, work on your writing. That's the best thing you can do right now." He left, his shoulders straight but heavy with burden. Emily tried to focus on her essays, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself pacing the penthouse, watching the clock crawl. Hours passed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city. Emily heard voices in the hallway. Alexander had returned. But instead of coming to see her, he went straight to his office. She crept closer, hearing his low voice on the phone. "No, I won't step down. This is a fabricated scandal. She's a talented writer who needed help escaping an abusive situation." Emily pressed her hand against her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she listened to Alexander fighting for his professional life. Through the partially open door, she could see him at his desk, his tie loosened, his free hand pressed against his forehead in exhaustion. "The shareholders are concerned." "Yes, I understand the optics." "No, absolutely not. I won't ask her to leave." Unable to bear more, Emily fled to her office. She pulled up her blog, staring at the words that had touched so many lives. Her latest essay about finding strength in vulnerability had over 10,000 comments. People shared their own stories of overcoming shame and abuse, thanking her for giving them courage. But now those same words might destroy the man who had given her the platform to write them. The irony was cruel. Her father had tried to sell her once, and now he was selling lies about her, profiting from her pain all over again. Emily's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Could she write something to counter his lies? Could her words save Alexander the way they had once saved him from depression? But what could she say that wouldn't make things worse? The city lights blurred through her tears as she stared at the blank document before her. Somewhere in the building, Alexander was fighting to keep his company, his reputation, everything he'd built. And it was all because he'd chosen to help her. She heard his office door close, his footsteps passing her door without stopping. He was giving her space, trying to protect her even now. But Emily had never felt more alone, more trapped by the consequences of her father's cruelty. Opening her blog's dashboard, she scrolled through her published essays. Finding Grace in the Fall, The Weight of Worth, Learning to Stand. Titles that had once filled her with pride now seemed to mock her. How could she write about standing tall when she felt responsible for bringing down someone else? A notification popped up. Another news site had published the story. This one included old photos of her father's gambling debts, suggesting Alexander had used them as leverage to acquire her. The truth was exactly opposite. But who would believe that? Emily closed her laptop, buried her face in her hands, and let the sobs come. They racked her body, heavy with guilt and fear. Everything Alexander had done to help her, the education, the safe home, the encouragement to write, was being twisted into something ugly. Through her tears, she could hear Alexander moving around in his home office next door. The sound of papers shuffling, phones ringing, muffled conversations with his legal team. He was fighting for his professional life, and she was helpless to stop it. She opened a new document, fingers trembling over the keys. Words had always been her salvation, but now, when she needed them most, they seemed to desert her. The cursor blinked accusingly on the empty page, like a reminder of everything at stake. Outside her window, the city continued its nighttime dance of lights and shadows, oblivious to the pain within the penthouse. Emily sat alone in her darkened office, her reflection ghostly in the glass, wondering if there were any words powerful enough to fight the poison her father had spread. Her blog glowed on the screen, a testament to everything Alexander had helped her achieve. But tonight, instead of feeling like a victory, it felt like evidence of all he stood to lose. Emily stared at her words, praying they could somehow become a shield for the man who had risked everything to give her a voice. The morning sun cast long shadows across the penthouse's marble floors as Emily made her way to the kitchen. Her eyes were swollen from a night of crying, her steps heavy with dread. But nothing could have prepared her for what waited. Alexander stood by the window, his usual crisp suit replaced by a casual sweater. He looked different somehow, softer, yet more determined. When he turned to face her, Emily's heart dropped at the resignation in his eyes. "I've made my decision," he said quietly, gesturing for her to sit at the breakfast counter. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Emily's legs went weak. She gripped the counter edge, shaking her head. No, you can't. It's already done. I called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon to announce it." His voice was gentle but firm. "This way, the company stays stable, and you're protected from further scandal." "Protected?" Emily's voice cracked. "How is destroying yourself protecting me? Your company is your life's work." Alexander moved closer, his blue eyes intense. "Emily, listen to me. I've spent 20 years building an empire of glass and steel. But in these past months, watching you reclaim your dignity, your voice, that's worth more than any company." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. "Please don't do this. My father wins if you give up everything." "Your father?" Alexander's laugh was soft, without humor. "Emily, this isn't about him. This is about showing the world that some things matter more than power or money. Your right to stand tall, to write your truth, that's worth fighting for." Emily pushed away from the counter, pacing the kitchen. "But your work, your employees, everything you've built, will continue without me," he finished. "The board will appoint a new CEO. The company will survive. But I won't be the reason your voice is silenced again." His words hit her like physical blows. Emily remembered the night he'd first told her about finding her essays, how they'd pulled him from depression. Now he was willing to sacrifice everything to protect her right to keep writing them. "There has to be another way," she whispered. Alexander shook his head. "The media storm is too strong. The board's patience is gone. This is the cleanest solution." "Clean for who?" Emily's voice rose. "Not for the thousands of people who work for you. Not for the projects you're developing. Not for—" She stopped, choking on tears. "Not for us?" Alexander finished softly. The word hung between them, acknowledging the unspoken connection that had grown beyond mentorship. Emily turned away, unable to bear the gentleness in his eyes. Throughout the day, Emily watched helplessly as Alexander prepared for his announcement. He made calls, signed papers, his movements careful and deliberate like a man accepting his fate. Each time their paths crossed, he tried to reassure her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As evening fell, Emily retreated to her room, but sleep was impossible. Her mind raced with memories, Alexander defending her at the gala, setting up her writing office, proudly introducing her as his protégé. How could she let him throw it all away? At midnight, restless and haunted, she opened her laptop. Her blog glowed in the darkness, thousands of comments testifying to lives touched by her words, people who'd found courage in her story, hope in her honesty. She clicked through her essays, reading passages that had resonated most deeply with readers. Sometimes strength looks like standing up. Sometimes it looks like letting someone help you stand. Worth isn't measured in pounds or dollars. It's measured in the courage to keep believing in yourself when the world tells you not to. The loudest voices telling us we're nothing are often the ones most afraid of what we might become. Emily's hands began to tremble as an idea took shape. Her words had already reached thousands of strangers, helping them find their own courage. Maybe they could do more. Maybe they could tell the truth about Alexander, about what real protection and mentorship looked like. She opened a blank document, her fingers hovering over the keys. This wouldn't be just another essay. This would be her stand. For Alexander, for truth, for everything he taught her about dignity. The cursor blinked steadily as Emily began to type, her hands shaking but her purpose clear. She would write their story, not the tabloid version, but the real one, about a man who saw value where others saw only profit, about how true strength sometimes meant risking everything to help someone else find their voice. Words flowed faster now, urgent and honest. She wrote about the morning Alexander showed her his highlighted copies of her essays, about quiet dinners where he taught her to defend her opinions, about watching him fight to protect her dreams even when it cost him everything. Outside her window, the city sparkled like scattered stars, a reminder of all Alexander had built. Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard, determined that tomorrow's sunrise would not mark the end of his legacy. The speech taking shape on her screen was more than just words. It was a declaration, a way to show the world that some stories were worth fighting for, some truths worth standing up for. Even when the price was steep, Emily wrote through her tears, through her fear, through the weight of what tomorrow might bring. Because Alexander had taught her that the most powerful words were the ones that cost you something to say. Her hands trembled with each paragraph, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not when Alexander's whole world hung in the balance. Not when she finally had the chance to save him the way he'd saved her. Emily's hands trembled as she smoothed down her simple navy dress. The conference room at the Holt Industries headquarters buzzed with anticipation, filled with reporters and cameras. She had arranged everything through Clara Stone, who understood immediately what Emily was trying to do. "Are you sure about this, dear?" Clara squeezed her hand backstage. "Once you step out there, there's no taking it back." Emily took a deep breath, clutching her printed speech. "I've spent my whole life letting others tell my story. Not anymore." The room fell silent as Emily stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes burst like lightning, momentarily blinding her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she gripped the wooden edges of the stand. Through the sea of faces, she caught sight of Alexander entering from the side door, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. Clara must have called him. His presence both terrified and strengthened her. "Good morning," Emily began, her voice shaky at first. "My name is Emily Grace. You may know me from recent headlines as the girl whose father tried to sell her at a charity gala." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. More cameras flashed. "Those headlines got one thing right. My father did try to sell me. He squeezed me into a dress too small, paraded me around like merchandise, and openly offered me to the highest bidder." Emily's voice grew stronger with each word. But that's where the truth in those stories ends. She looked directly into the nearest camera, remembering all the times her father had made her feel worthless. "For 18 years, my father told me I was too big, too much, too heavy a burden. He made sure I knew that my only value lay in what a wealthy man might pay for me." The room was absolutely still now. Emily could see several reporters lowering their notepads, caught up in her words. "When Alexander Holt stepped forward that night, everyone assumed he was buying what my father was selling. But Mr. Holt did something revolutionary instead. He saw me as a person, not as property, not as a transaction, as a human being with worth beyond my body or my father's price tag." Emily's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed forward. "Mr. Holt discovered my writing before he ever met me. Anonymous essays I'd posted online about surviving in a world that tells girls like me we're too much. He recognized my voice because those words had once helped him through his own dark times." She glanced at Alexander, who stood absolutely still, his face a mask of controlled emotion. "When he took me away that night, it wasn't to own me. It was to give me back my voice. He enrolled me in college courses. He gave me a space to write. He showed me that my words matter, that my thoughts have value, that my size doesn't determine my worth." Tears pricked at her eyes, but Emily blinked them back. "Every day, I receive messages from women who've read my blog. Women who've been told they're too big, too loud, too much. Women whose families, like mine, tried to shrink them into something more acceptable. They tell me my words give them courage, but I wouldn't have found the strength to keep writing if Alexander Holt hadn't first shown me that I deserved to be heard. Several female reporters were openly wiping their eyes now. Emily's hands had stopped shaking. The recent headlines want you to believe this is a story about a wealthy man buying a young woman. But it's really a story about how body shaming destroys lives. About how fathers who treat their daughters like property create wounds that take years to heal. About how one person believing in you can change everything. Emily straightened her shoulders, her voice clear and strong. I'm not Alexander Holt's property. I'm his protege. He gave me safety when I needed it, education when I craved it, and respect when I'd forgotten I deserved it. He risks losing everything now because he chose to help me. But I won't let him lose his life's work for doing the right thing. The room erupted with camera flashes and shouted questions. Emily held up her hand, not finished yet. To every girl who's ever been told she's too much, you're not. To every woman who's been made to feel her body is wrong, it isn't. And to every person who's been treated like property, you're not for sale. Your voice matters, your story matters. And no one has the right to silence you. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. Reporters jumped to their feet, hands raised with questions. Emily could see tears on some faces, recognition on others. She had touched something raw and real in that room. Through it all, she kept her eyes on Alexander. He stood perfectly still, his usual mask of control cracked wide open, showing pride and something deeper that made her heart skip. Miss Grace, how do you respond to your father's allegations? Mr. Holt, did you know she would speak today? Emily, will you write about this experience? The questions flew at her like arrows, but Emily felt strong enough to face them all. For the first time in her life, she was completely in control of her own story. She had taken the narrative back from her father, from the tabloids, from everyone who had tried to define her. Looking out at the sea of raised hands and eager faces, Emily realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her voice, and now everyone would hear it. The crowd's energy was electric, their attention completely captured by the young woman who had dared to stand up and tell her truth. Emily felt light, powerful, free. Everything her father had tried to prevent her from becoming, she had done it. She had finally taken control of her own story. The impact of Emily's press conference was immediate and overwhelming. As night fell over the city, her brave words had already spread across social media like wildfire. Video clips of her speech circulated endlessly, shared by thousands who found their own struggles reflected in her story. Emily sat in her office, staring at her computer screen in disbelief. Her inbox was flooded with messages, each notification chime bringing another story of connection and gratitude. She clicked through them, tears welling in her eyes as she read. Your words gave me courage to finally stand up to my mother's criticism. I've spent years hating my body, but hearing you speak made me realize I'm not alone. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. The messages kept coming, a steady stream of hearts touching hers. Women of all ages shared their own experiences with body shaming, with being treated as less than human, with finding their voice against all odds. Emily's hands shook as she tried to respond to as many as she could. Major news networks picked up the story, running continuous coverage of her speech. Commentators praised her courage and authenticity. Social media hashtags trended. Number Emily Grace, number not for sale, number too much. Her blog traffic exploded, with readers going back through her archived essays, finding strength in words she'd written during her darkest days. The corporate world took notice too. Alexander's phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members who had suddenly changed their tune. His assistant forwarded email after email from them, each one more conciliatory than the last. Mr. Holt, in light of recent developments, after careful consideration of Miss Grace's statement, the board wishes to express its full support. Emily watched from her office as Alexander paced the hallway, fielding calls. His usual stern expression had softened into something like amazement. She could hear snippets of conversation as he passed her door. Yes, she wrote that speech herself. No, I had no idea she planned this. Of course, I stand by everything she said. By late afternoon, the board had called an emergency meeting. They voted unanimously to reinstate Alexander with full powers and issued a public statement supporting both him and Emily. The statement praised his exemplary mentorship and commitment to empowering young voices. Clara and David Stone called to congratulate them both, their voices warm with pride. "We knew you had it in you, dear," Clara told Emily. "You've changed so many lives today." As evening settled over the city, Emily's social media following had grown exponentially. Her latest blog post, a simple thank you to everyone who had shared their stories, received thousands of comments within minutes. Publishers started reaching out, interested in turning her essays into a book. The sun was setting when Alexander's housekeeper announced dinner was ready. Emily closed her laptop, her head spinning from the day's events. She made her way to the dining room, where the table was set as always, elegant but informal, a space where they could be themselves. Alexander was already seated, his tie loosened, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in weeks. When Emily entered, he stood, a gesture of respect that had become natural between them. "I ordered your favorite," he said softly. "I thought you deserved it after today." Emily sat down, smoothing her skirt nervously. The familiar smell of her favorite pasta dish filled the air, bringing comfort after such an intense day. "I still can't believe it worked," she admitted, picking up her fork. "I was so scared they wouldn't listen." Alexander's blue eyes met hers across the table. "I never expected you to be the one to save me," he said quietly. "All this time, I thought I was protecting you, but you ended up protecting both of us." Emily felt her cheeks warm. "I never expected anyone to give me a chance," she replied, looking down at her plate. "My whole life, people just saw what was wrong with me, until you saw what was right." When she looked up again, Alexander was watching her, with an expression that made her heart skip. His usual mask of cool control had melted completely, replaced by something warmer, deeper, something that spoke of possibilities neither of them had dared to consider before. "You saved yourself," he said firmly. "I just gave you the space to do it." Emily smiled, feeling truly beautiful for the first time in her life. Not because of how she looked, but because of who she had become. The light in Alexander's eyes told her he saw it too, not just the scared girl he'd rescued, but the strong woman she'd grown into. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both processing the day's events. Outside the windows, the city lights twinkled like stars, reminding Emily of how far she'd come from that terrible night at the gala. "The publishers want to meet next week," Alexander mentioned casually. "3 of them so far." Emily nearly dropped her fork. "Really?" He nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Your words deserve to be heard by even more people, though I admit, I'm a bit selfish about sharing them. Those essays meant everything to me when I first found them." Their eyes met across the table again, and this time neither looked away. Something electric passed between them, a spark of recognition, of possibility, of futures neither had imagined before today. Emily smiled, her heart full of gratitude and something else, something new and wonderful that made her feel warm inside. Alexander smiled back, his eyes soft with an emotion that mirrored her own. In that moment, surrounded by the golden evening light and the comfortable silence they'd grown to share, both knew that everything had changed. Not just because of the press conference or its aftermath, but because of the way they were looking at each other now, seeing not mentor and protege, but 2 people who had saved each other in ways neither expected. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, casting a gentle glow over their quiet dinner, while possibility hung in the air between their shared smiles and understood silence. The late afternoon sun streamed through the bookstore's wide windows, casting a warm glow over the growing crowd. Emily stood in the back room, her hand smoothing down her navy blue dress, a confident choice she'd made herself, not a restriction forced upon her. Her newly published book, Too Much, finding worth in a world that wants less, sat in neat stacks on tables throughout the store. 5 minutes until we open the doors, the bookstore manager announced, peeking her head in. There's quite a line outside. Emily's heart fluttered. She picked up a copy of her book, running her fingers over the embossed cover. The weight of it in her hands felt surreal. All her essays, all her truth, bound together in something permanent and real. Alexander knocked softly before entering, looking sharp in his charcoal suit. "Ready?" he asked, his blue eyes warm with pride. "I think so," Emily replied, taking a deep breath. "I just can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," he said softly. "You earned every bit of this." The sound of doors opening and excited voices filled the store. Emily's fingers tightened on her book, but Alexander's steady presence beside her helped calm her nerves. Together, they walked out into the main space of the bookstore. The crowd erupted in applause. Emily blinked back tears as she took in the scene. Hundreds of people had come, filling every available space between the bookshelves. Signs of support and welcome decorated the walls, and her book cover was displayed prominently in the window. Clara and David Stone stood in the front row, beaming. Clara gave her an encouraging wink as Emily made her way to the podium that had been set up near the signing table. "Thank you all for coming," Emily began, her voice stronger than she expected. "A year ago, I never would have believed this moment was possible. I was trapped in silence, convinced that my voice, that I, was too much for this world." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. So many women nodded in understanding, their eyes reflecting back their own stories of struggle and survival. But then someone showed me that being too much wasn't my failure, it was the world's. Someone taught me that my voice mattered, that my words could help others feel less alone. Her eyes found Alexander's, and he nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. "This book is for everyone who's ever been told to be less loud, less emotional, less visible. It's for everyone who's carried the weight of other people's judgments. And it's for everyone who's ready to stand up and say, 'I am enough, exactly as I am.'" The applause was deafening. Emily moved to the signing table, where a line quickly formed. Alexander stood quietly to the side, a protective presence without being overbearing. The first person in line was an elderly woman who could barely hold back her tears. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging Emily tightly. "I've spent 73 years believing I was wrong for taking up space. Your words helped me see the truth." Emily signed her book with trembling hands, writing a personal message of encouragement. Person after person approached, each sharing their own story of struggle and hope. A teenage girl admitted she'd started writing her own essays after reading Emily's blog. A middle-aged woman revealed she'd finally left an abusive relationship after reading about Emily's escape from her father. Hours passed, but Emily took time with each person, listening to their stories, offering hugs and words of support. Alexander made sure she had water, occasionally touching her shoulder gently in silent support. Clara and David stayed throughout the event, helping the bookstore staff manage the crowd and ensure everyone got their books signed. Clara occasionally whispered encouraging words to Emily, proud as if she were her own daughter. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, the crowd finally thinned. Emily's hand ached from signing, but her heart felt full to bursting. The bookstore manager announced they would be closing soon, thanking everyone for making the launch such a success. Emily stood from the signing table, emotional and exhausted, but deeply content. She looked around at the nearly empty shelves where her books had been. They'd sold out completely. The manager was already calling the publisher to rush more copies. Alexander approached her, his eyes soft with admiration. "You did it," he said simply. Emily felt tears well up again, but these were different from the scared, hopeless tears she'd shed so many times before. These were tears of joy, of achievement, of knowing she had finally become the person she was meant to be. Without hesitation, she slipped her hand into his. The gesture felt natural, right? No longer the desperate grip of a frightened girl seeking protection, but the confident touch of a woman who knew her own worth. Alexander's fingers tightened around hers, warm and secure. They stood together, surrounded by the lingering energy of the day's events. The empty book displays testament to the impact of Emily's words. Through the windows, the city lights began to twinkle on, and Emily stood tall, her hand in Alexander's, finally home in her own skin. Crisp autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet as Emily and Alexander walked through Central Park. The morning sun painted everything in warm golden light, making the red and orange leaves glow like stained glass. A gentle breeze carried the scent of coffee from nearby cafes and the sweet mustiness of fallen leaves. Emily pulled her cream-colored sweater closer, grateful for its warmth. Alexander walked beside her, his steady presence as reassuring as ever. They developed a comfortable silence over the months, but today felt different, contemplative, like the pause before a symphony's final note. "It's strange," Emily said softly, watching a cluster of leaves dance across their path. "Sometimes I think about that night at the gala. How terrified I was, how worthless I felt, like I was just property being handed over." Alexander's hand tightened slightly around hers. "I remember seeing you there, trying so hard to disappear into yourself. I thought I was being given away," Emily continued, her voice stronger now. "But really, I was being given a chance to become myself." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "You gave me that chance." "No." Alexander shook his head, his blue eyes warm with affection. "You gave yourself that chance. You just needed someone to believe in you until you could believe in yourself." They resumed walking, their path taking them past shop windows reflecting the morning light. As they approached a familiar bookstore, Emily caught sight of their reflection in the window. There they stood, hand in hand, smiling at each other, framed by the display of her best-selling book. The cover caught the sunlight, making the title gleam. "You were never a burden, Emily," Alexander said softly, watching their reflected images. "You were always a blessing. You helped me find my humanity again." Emily squeezed his hand, her heart full. In the window's reflection, she saw not the frightened girl from the gala, but a woman who had reclaimed her dignity and found her voice. Her story, displayed proudly in the window, had become a beacon of hope for others, proof that faith, courage, and love could transform even the deepest wounds into strength. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.